This is my son's '06 Mitsubishi Outlander 2.4. So I got a little project because the timing belt slipped off while he was driving, and of course had bent the valves. You can see the belt is off here. So I did a leak down, and intake valves, these two intake valves are bent. All these exhaust valves are bent. So maybe we'll try to fix it. I'm not sure yet. We're just going to pull the head off and see if I can just put some valves in or not. If nothing else is damaged. But this is quite common. The car's got a lot of miles on it. I'm sure we should have changed the belt a long time ago, but you know, you just don't think of everything all the time. You see I got a lot of it apart. All the rockers are off. Getting ready to pull the intake out. Getting all these bolts out of here wasn't easy. And there are also two bolts on a bracket down from underneath, two 14mm bolts that you have to take off in order to get the intake off. I get this out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and pull the bottom cam cover off to see what failed. I'm not sure yet. Obviously the belt's loose and it's off, so we'll figure it out as we go. But yeah, we're gonna take one attempt at looking at this and see how much it'll cost for us to put it back together. Well, I'm not sure which belt broke first, but they're broke toast. They're both broken in half. Wow. Not sure which belt took out the other one. This one's also broken. Both broken in half. Everything in here turns, you know. Nothing up here locked up anywhere to would bust them. But there you go. Wow. I guess I should have changed this a long time ago. You know, what they say about hindsight. Well, I'm going to pull the intake off, and I'm going to pull the head. I got a bunch of new parts that arrived today. I hate to put a lot of money in a car this old, this many miles on it. I just found out that you can get a lot of stuff for very little money. Yeah, it's not all top quality stuff. I'm sure it's made in China, but all this, head bolts, both belts, valve seals, all three pulleys, cam seals, all kind of seals here, valve cover gasket and head gasket. I mean, all that for $80 shipped. That's hard to beat. They even sent along that. How about that? We'll see how this all goes together. Just try to save this car and run another day. I really didn't intend to drive it forever. So maybe these parts will hold up long enough, maybe to get another year out of it, huh? That's all I really need. Oh, well, I got the cylinder head off. If you look at the piston, you can see where all four valves touch there. The two intakes really took a beating on this cylinder, probably the worst of any of them. But they've all got the telltale marks that the valves touch the piston. Except maybe this one. The intake's a little bit. The rest of them all hit, and this one on the intakes hit the hardest. Let me show you. Well, as you can see, those are really bent badly. The rest of them, not so much. I guess they got a light tap. These two intakes on number one took a beating. I'm betting that the valve guide's probably been damaged. How bad? Well, hard to say. Looking down in there, you probably won't be able to see that. Nah, don't think so. But there's a small crack in the valve guide on these two intakes. I need to pull these valves out, of course, to see how badly it really is. The problem is, these tools that I use for taking valve springs off will not work on this head. So I need to go find some proper tools that get these springs off and pull these two intake valves out and decide whether or not I'm going to keep this head or not and just put new valves in it. Everything else looks pretty good because these all took just a light tap. You can't even tell they're bent from here, but they all leak. I did a leak down on all of them, and most of these will leak on the exhaust. Of course, this one, that's beyond help. Well, let me get these valves out and see how badly things are damaged. Well, these two intake valves that I showed earlier, these are the ones that are bent the most. They're really bad. I'm surprised they didn't break off. But as I suspected, something had to give. And you can see the valve guide is cracked in two places on both of these. So, like, what do? You know? I'm not going to rebuild the whole head. I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of money on this car. And these cracks kind of tend to come together inside. So I'm worried that maybe that piece could break off at some point. So I think what I'll do is take the tip of that valve guide and just cut it off. And we'll just run without it. I think it'll work alright. I mean, it's not perfect, obviously. It should be sent to a machine shop, new guides put in, yada yada yada. But I'm not going to do all that to this car. I'm afraid those pieces might break off and end up in the combustion chamber, and that would be catastrophic. So I'm going to take the tip of these valve guides and just remove them. That way you won't worry about anything chipping off and end up in the combustion chamber. The rest of the head looks pretty good. All the guides, all the other valves really were not that bad. These are really two that must have been wide open when the piston came up. Some of the other ones, yeah, you know, I did a leak down, and some of these were leaking, some of the exhausts were leaking, so it must be just a little bit bent. But most of them tapped the top of the pistons except for number 4. So the thing to do is just change them all. I can get a complete set of valves with new valve guides for 40 bucks. So there's no reason to use any of these old valves. I'll just put all new ones in. My only concern is use valve guides. And I wouldn't be concerned if the cracks didn't come together inside. If that breaks off, of course, that's really bad. So my next course of action would be to cut off that guide, get rid of the part that's cracked so nothing comes off of it, clean this head up. Valves won't be here for 4 or 5 days. I got lots of other work I can do. I got a water pump I need to install. All new pulleys and a lot of work to do on the top of the block too. It all needs cleaned up. So does this. So the next 3 or 4 days I'll start putting this back together. I'm going to do like an old style valve job. I'm going to lap all these new valves in, put new valve seals on them, and put them back together. And just put this back together. Hopefully if it runs another year, hey, that's all I'm looking for. That would be good enough. Well, the new valves have arrived. I got the head cleaned up, getting ready to lap all the valves in, put the springs on, the rockers on, get this head back on. The valve guide that was cracked, I took an 1/8 inch drill bit and drilled into it to get all the cracked pieces out of it, and they just fell right out. But better get these out now than have them falling into the combustion chamber and smashing everything. What's left in there is solid, no more cracks, so we will assume they'll stay put. I'll get these lapped in today. So far, everything I purchased for this motor, valves, gaskets, water pump, seals, belts, pulleys, 140 bucks total. So it's just a cheap, put it back together and get it running again. We'll see how it's going to work out. Well, things are moving along quite nicely. I have 4 more valves to install, and then the rocker arms, and then I got to adjust all the valves. Everything's gone pretty well so far. I did spend a couple of hours at least lapping all these valves in. Some of them took quite a bit of work. This engine has 190,000 miles on it, so it's to be expected. But they came out pretty good. The seats look really nice. Get that dull gray color, and you know you've got it right. The same thing on the valves. Once you lap them in, you should have a nice even dark or light gray satin finish all the way around evenly. I did find those 16 valves that I've got, one intake valve did not lap in well. You can see it's just even gray color all the way around. It's almost as though this new valve wasn't hardened correctly or something like that. But they may be kind of leery about using it. Fortunately, I had 2 intake valves that were not bent, and I reused one of those because it should look like this after you lap it. So there's definitely something wrong with this new valve. They are, you know, they're only about $2.50 a piece. I guess you can't expect perfection. These are cheap parts, I know that. But I'm not going to use this intake valve. The rest of them all lapped in well. They look correct. And I'm going to finish installing these last 4 and get this project moving on. Well, it's running. Been driving around all day today, and no problems so far. When I reassembled it, I only had really 2 problems that were annoying. I bolted in the intake manifold, which wasn't easy, because the nuts and the bolts are really hard to get to. So I put the intake on, I bolted up all the nuts and bolts on that side of the intake, tightened them up. And I tried to install the thermostat housing right here. It has 3 bolts that go through the housing, then it goes through the intake manifold and into the threads into the cylinder head. Well, the problem was, after I bolted up the intake, the right side of this intake on the driver's side was too low to line up with the threaded holes in the head, so the thermostat housing would not go on. So I had to loosen up all the bolts in the intake, get the thermostat housing ready to go on, pick up on the intake manifold on this side, raise it up, and I got all the bolts started for the thermostat housing and tightened it up first, and then went back and tightened the rest of the bolts on the intake. That set me back about 2 hours because the bolts on the intake, nuts on the intake on the bottom are really hard to get to. And it wasn't fun. Once we got it running, to get the radiator full, I found you had to just dribble some coolant in there a little bit at a time and keep going at it because it would just go down a little bit. You put some more in, it'll go down a little bit more. It took a long time to actually get the air out of this radiator and get it filled up. That's really the only big problems I had. The rest of it just bolted back together. As far as the timing belts, how they go on, there's lots of YouTube videos about that. That's pretty common repair on these, and I just followed what I found on YouTube. You know, a lot of guys have already done that. So the question is, you know, I rebuilt this motor for $140 plus a gallon of antifreeze with cheap Chinese parts, and you wonder, okay, are they going to last? Well, that I don't know. But over time, all these parts that I replaced, we'll find out if they're going to hold up with all the cheap Chinese stuff that I bought. The car's not worth that much. It's got a lot of miles on it. It's a little rusty. My son likes this car. He wanted to get some more use out of it, so I saved it for him. Not everyone would do that because the labor costs would have been way over the top as far as that goes. But you know, it's Dad's garage, and like the sign says, Dad's garage. You break it, he'll fix it. Yep, and it's always free. So, if I have any problems with this, if it blows up in the next week or two, I'll let you know. Otherwise, right now, hey, it's running great.